Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. The World, from the Height of a Chairlift, is a masterpiece of blue and white. The sky was a sharp, cloudless cerulean, the kind that only happens at high altitude on a frigid morning. Below, the snow was a pristine blanket, scarred only by the elegant, curving lines of skiers who had come before. This was my sanctuary. My name is Mark Peterson. I'm 38, and for the last year since the divorce, the mountains have been the only place I can truly breathe. The crisp air feels like it scours the loneliness from your lungs. Up here, swinging gently in the cold, I wasn't a divorced sales manager living in a condo that still felt too empty. I was just a skier, a body in motion, a mind focused only on the next turn, the bite of my edges in the corduroy groomer. It was simple. It was pure. Or at least it was supposed to be. The problem started with the lift line. I'd ended up shuffled into a quad chair with two teenagers who looked and sounded like they'd escaped from a fraternity party that had been raging since dawn. They were all baggy pants, oversized goggles, and loud, obnoxious confidence. Dude, did you see that landing one of them? A lanky kid with a wispy attempt at a beard shouted over the wind, "Bro, that was sick, but check out the talent down there. 10 o'clock, the other one replied, his voice cracking with puberty. I tried to tune them out, focusing on the majestic peak of Mount Aspen ahead. I was here for solitude, not to be an unwilling audience to teenage bravado. I shifted my weight, the hard plastic of the chair cold against my ski pants, and angled my body away from them, a silent, useless protest. Oh, yeah, the first kid breathed, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, yet still perfectly audible, stage whisper. The one in the pink, total ski bunny. Bet she spends more time in the lodge drinking hot cocoa than on the slopes. Nah, man, look at that form. The second one argued, and for a horrible second, I thought he was going to be the voice of reason. I was wrong. She's got the form. All right, I'd like to see that form without the ski suit. They both snickered. A hot, uncomfortable flush crept up my neck. I felt a surge of secondhand embarrassment, that weird shame you feel when you're associated with people you can't stand. My ex-wife, Claire, used to say I was too sensitive to social awkwardness. Maybe she was right. Right now, I just wanted the chair to speed up. I wanted to be off this lift and away from these two clowns. I kept my gaze fixed firmly forward, my jaw tight. I didn't dare look down. I didn't want to be part of their leering. The girl they were talking about was a flash of neon pink against the stark white snow. She was carving beautiful. Wide turns down a black diamond run. Her movements fluid and controlled. Even from this distance, you could tell she was an expert. Far better than the two idiots sitting next to me. Seriously, though, the first kid said, his voice now laced with a crude, predatory tone that made my stomach clench. Look at the way that suit hugs her ass. I'd follow those tracks all day. His friend let out a low whistle. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment. Just get to the top. Mark, just get off the lift. The shame was burning in my cheeks now. It felt like their disgusting words were somehow sticking to me, as if I were complicit just by being here. And that's when it happened. The girl in pink finished her run, pulling to a graceful stop directly under our chairlift's path. She reached up, pulling her own goggles off and resting them on her helmet, and then she looked up. Her eyes, dark and intense, scanned the chair. They passed over the two smirking teenagers without a flicker of recognition and landed directly, unequivocally, on me. Her expression was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Her lips were pressed into a thin, white line. It was a look of such focused contempt that it felt like a physical blow, a look that said, clear as day, "I heard you." My heart hammered against my ribs. No, not me. I wanted to scream. It was them, but my throat was dry. My words caught behind a wall of shock. One of the teens, oblivious, let out another crude comment. And then, just as the lift was carrying us over the ridge and out of her sight, she spoke. Her voice was too far away to hear clearly, but her lips formed a single, sharp, venomous word that I could read perfectly. Creep. The word hit me harder than the icy wind. My blood ran cold. She thought it was me. She thought I was the one objectifying her, reducing her to a piece of meat in a pink suit. The injustice of it was a bitter pill in my throat. The perfect, peaceful day was shattered, leaving behind only the jagged edges of a horrible misunderstanding. For the next hour, I tried to ski it off. I pushed myself hard, flying down steep, moguled runs until my thighs burned and my lungs ached. Skiing was my therapy, a way to sweat out the stress of my life. But today, it wasn't working. The image of that woman's face, twisted in disgust and aimed at me, was burned into the back of my eyelids. Every time I saw a flash of pink on the slopes, my stomach would lurch. I felt like a criminal. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting a ski patrol officer to pull me over for some phantom infraction. The two teenagers were long gone, probably bragging about their supposed conquests in the terrain park, leaving me to carry the weight of their filth. After my fourth run, I decided I needed a break. I was making sloppy turns, my focus completely shot. I charted a course toward the Mid-Mountain Lodge, a sprawling log cabin structure with smoke curling lazily from its stone chimney. A hot coffee and 5 minutes of quiet, I thought, would set me right. I was gliding along a flat catwalk that led to the lodge entrance when a figure shot out from behind a stand of fir trees, cutting me off with a spray of snow. I dug my edges in hard, coming to a skidding, undignified stop just inches from them. It was her, the girl in pink. Up close, she was even more striking. She couldn't have been older than her mid-20s. She had a heart-shaped face, framed by a few loose strands of dark hair that had escaped her helmet. Her makeup was flawless, even after what must have been hours of skiing. Long, dark lashes, a hint of shimmer on her eyelids, and lips painted a bold, glossy pink that matched her suit. The suit itself was a marvel of engineering, clinging to a figure that was all athletic curves. She was the absolute, undeniable embodiment of the ski bunny stereotype the teens had mocked, and right now, she was staring at me with the same cold fury I'd seen from the chairlift. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was low and steady, but it vibrated with suppressed anger. "Look," I started, holding up my hands in a placating gesture. "I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. I wasn't—" "Don't," she snapped, taking a step closer. The tips of her skis nearly touched mine. "Don't you dare lie to me. I heard you. I heard everything you and your little friend said up there." "They weren't my friends," I insisted, my own frustrations starting to bubble up. "I was stuck on the lift with them. I didn't say a single word." She let out a short, bitter laugh. It was a sound completely devoid of humor. "Oh, I see. The silent partner. You just sit there and let them spew their garbage. And that makes you innocent. That makes you better than them." Her accusation stung because there was a sliver of truth to it. I hadn't said anything. I hadn't told them to shut up. I had just sat there, stewing in my own discomfort. Was that a crime? "What was I supposed to do?" I asked, my voice rising. "Start a fight on a chairlift 30 feet in the air." "You were supposed to be a decent human being," she retorted, her eyes flashing. "You were supposed to see a person, not just a body to be rated and commented on, but men like you never do. You look, you judge, you desire, you discard. It's all just a visual game for you." I was speechless. She had tried and convicted me without any evidence, based on nothing more than proximity. I opened my mouth to argue again, to plead my case, but she wasn't interested in a debate. She reached into a pocket on the sleeve of her impossibly tight pink jacket and pulled something out. It was a small, palm-sized pouch, the kind you shake to activate a chemical reaction for heat, a disposable hand warmer. But this one was different. Instead of being a dull gray or white, the fabric of the pouch was the same vibrant, almost glowing pink as her outfit, and it was pulsating with a soft, inner light. "You know what I'm sick of," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. It was more menacing than her shouting. "I'm sick of the gaze, that constant, unblinking, assessing stare, from the lift, from the lodge, from the bar, the feeling of being watched, picked apart, and consumed by 100 pairs of eyes every single day." She held the glowing pink pouch in her gloved hand, cradling it like it was something sacred or something dangerous. "You seem to enjoy the view so much," she whispered, her eyes locking with mine. A cold dread, colder than the mountain air, began to creep down my spine. This was getting weird, really weird. She began to chant, her voice a low rhythmic hum that seemed to vibrate in the air between us. "Since you see with your eyes, and think with them too, let the world see the very same thing in you. Let the gaze that you cast, with its casual disdain, return to you tenfold, in pleasure and pain." As she finished the last word, she crushed the hand warmer in her fist. It didn't just get hot, it exploded. Not with fire or force, but with light and energy. A cloud of shimmering, impossibly pink dust erupted from her hand, engulfing me completely. It didn't feel like dust, though. It felt like a million tiny, warm needles pricking every inch of my exposed skin. It smelled sweet, like cotton candy and ozone. I gasped, stumbling backward, my skis crossing. The world swam in a haze of magenta. I felt a profound full-body tingling sensation, like a limb that had fallen asleep and was just now waking up. It started in my fingertips and toes and raced inward, converging in my chest in a dizzying, electric rush. My body felt suddenly alien, a buzzing, vibrating vessel that was no longer entirely under my control. When the pink fog finally cleared, she was gone. The only evidence she'd ever been there was a faint, shimmering pink residue on the snow where she'd stood. I was left alone, trembling, my heart trying to beat its way out of my ribcage. The tingling sensation didn't fade. If anything, it was getting stronger. Something was happening to me, something impossible. My first instinct was to get away, to hide. My legs felt shaky and disconnected from my brain, but I managed to push off, skiing clumsily toward the lodge. The buzzing in my limbs was intensifying, accompanied by a strange sense of lightness, as if my bones were becoming less dense. My body didn't feel like my own. It was a foreign machine I was struggling to pilot. I spotted the public restroom sign near the main ski rack and aimed for it like a drowning man aiming for a life raft. I stumbled out of my skis, leaving them in a tangled heap, and practically fell through the door, thankfully. The men's room was empty. The air was thick with the smell of pine disinfectant and melting snow. I lurched toward the bank of sinks, gripping the cold, wet countertop to steady myself. My reflection in the mirror was pale, my eyes wide with panic. I looked like myself, but I felt completely wrong. "Get a grip, Mark," I muttered, my voice sounding distant and tinny. I splashed cold water on my face. The tingling was still there, a low-level hum beneath my skin. I looked down at my hands, which were still braced on the sink, and I screamed. It was a choked, strangled sound, half swallowed by disbelief. They weren't my hands. My hands were broad, the knuckles slightly calloused from years of working on my car and weekend DIY projects. They were a man's hands. These were not. The hands gripping the sink were smaller, more slender. The fingers were long and elegant, the skin smooth and pale, without a single scar or callus. The nails, which I always kept clipped short and practical, were now perfectly shaped, oval, and painted with a coat of shimmery, light pink nail polish. I held them up in front of my face, turning them over and over. I flexed the fingers, watching in horror as they moved under my command. They were attached to my wrists, my arms. They were mine, but they were not. No, this isn't possible," I whispered, my breath fogging up the mirror. This had to be a hallucination, a reaction to the altitude, a bad dream. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. The tingling sensation in my chest was coalescing into a distinct pressure, a strange and unfamiliar weight. My ski jacket, which had been comfortably loose just minutes ago, suddenly felt tight across my torso. It was a strange, constricting feeling, pressing against my pecs. With trembling fingers, my new alien fingers, I fumbled with the zipper of my jacket. I had to see. I had to prove to myself that I was going crazy, that my mind was playing tricks on me. I pulled the zipper down and peeled the jacket open. My blood ran cold. I wasn't wearing my trusty gray thermal base layer. Instead, stretched taut across a chest that was no longer flat, was a hot pink sports bra. The sight was so fundamentally wrong, so utterly impossible, that my brain simply refused to process it for a second. The fabric was smooth and synthetic, the color of violent assault on the senses, and underneath it, there was a definite, undeniable softness and swell. I hesitantly reached a hand up, my slender fingers brushing against the fabric. I could feel the gentle curve of a breast beneath. My breast. A wave of nausea and vertigo washed over me. I staggered back, hitting the tiled wall with a thud. This couldn't be real. It was a nightmare. A vivid, terrifying nightmare. My panic escalated. My ski pants felt wrong. They were looser in the waist, yet tighter around my hips and thighs in a way they never had been before. My whole center of gravity felt off. With a desperate sob, I undid the snaps on my ski pants and shoved them down over my hips. They didn't fall to my ankles. They stopped, caught on the curve of hips that were suddenly wider, fuller, and below them. I wasn't wearing my usual boxer briefs. I was wearing a pair of sleek, black, high-waisted leggings that hugged every new, terrifying contour of my lower body. The material was thin and shiny, cool against my skin. And underneath the leggings, I could feel the thin, tight line of a thong, a pink thong, to match the bra. My breath hitched. The final, most dreadful realization was dawning, with a sense of impending doom that was so absolute it was almost calm. I hooked my thumbs into the waistband of the leggings and pulled them down. I looked, and the last vestiges of Mark Peterson, the man I had been my entire life, evaporated. Everything was gone. My manhood, the physical, anatomical proof of my identity, had vanished. In its place was the smooth, soft, and terrifyingly unfamiliar anatomy of a woman. The scream that tore from my throat this time was not my own. It was higher, sharper, laced with a pure, primal terror. It was the scream of a stranger. It was the scream of a woman, and it was coming from me. I scrambled backward, crab-walking away from the mirror until my back hit the cold, unforgiving tile of the far wall. I slid down to the floor, my new body a jumble of unfamiliar angles and curves. I pulled my knees up to my chest, a chest that now had soft, sensitive mounds of flesh that pressed uncomfortably against my thighs. "Wake up, wake up, wake up," I chanted, my voice a high, reedy whisper. I squeezed my eyes shut and slapped my own face. The sting was real, sharp and clear. My skin felt softer, more delicate than it should. When I opened my eyes, nothing had changed. The slender, manicured hands were still attached to my arms. The pink sports bra was still visible where my jacket hung open. This wasn't a dream. A fresh wave of panic, cold and acidic, rose in my throat. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like jelly. My balance was completely shot. I'd spent decades in this body. I knew its weight, its dimensions, its center of gravity. Now, it was all wrong. My hips felt wider, my rear fuller, and the subtle shift in weight distribution made walking feel like a toddler's first attempt. I stumbled, catching myself on the door of a toilet stall. My reflection was still there in the mirror, waiting for me. I forced myself to approach it, to confront the horror head-on. I needed to see the full extent of the damage. Slowly, I raised my eyes from the terrifying new landscape of my body to the face staring back at me. It was the face of a stranger, And yet, it was achingly familiar. The underlying bone structure was my jawline. My nose, but it had been softened, refined. My square jaw was now a more delicate oval. My thin, unremarkable lips were now fuller, plumper, and colored with the same shade of glossy pink as the woman's on the slopes. My eyebrows were perfectly arched. The faint lines of stress and age around my eyes had vanished, replaced by smooth, taut skin. And my eyes were the same shade of blue, but they seemed larger, more luminous, framed by long, dark lashes that I could feel brushing against my skin when I blinked. But the biggest shock was my hair. My short, practical brown hair was gone. In its place, a cascade of silky, dark brown hair fell to my shoulders, framing my new face in soft waves. I tentatively reached up and touched it. It was real. It was my hair. I ran my fingers through the strands, the sensation completely alien. Tears began to well up, blurring the image of the woman in the mirror. A sob escaped my full lips. It was a sound of pure grief. Grief for the man I had been, for the body I had known, for the life that had been stolen from me in a cloud of pink dust. Who was this person? This girl staring back at me with my own terrified eyes. A part of my mind, the rational, logical part that had gotten me through a divorce and a demanding career, was screaming, "This is impossible. Magic isn't real. Curses are for fairy tales. There has to be a scientific explanation, a powerful hallucinogen, maybe a psychotic break." But my body was providing undeniable, sensory proof to the contrary. The feeling of my long hair brushing against my neck, the strange, heavy sensation of my new breasts, the smooth, hairless skin on my legs, now encased in sleek leggings. The way the air felt different, colder, on my more sensitive skin. I was trapped. I was a prisoner in the body of a young, attractive woman. The ski bunny's curse wasn't just a rhyme. It was a reality. Let the world see the very same thing in you. She had turned me into an object of the very gaze she despised. She had turned me into her. A hot, furious anger surged through me, momentarily eclipsing the fear. How dare she? How dare she do this to me over a misunderstanding? I clenched my fists, my pretty, manicured nails digging into my soft palms. The brief flash of pain was grounding. I had to fix this. I had to find her and make her change me back. But first, I had to get out of this bathroom. I had to walk out into the world in this costume, this body. The thought sent a fresh jolt of terror through me. I took a deep, shuddering breath, my new, smaller lungs struggling to draw in enough air. I looked at the woman in the mirror one last time, at her tear-streaked face and wide, panicked eyes. I am Mark Peterson, I thought, a desperate, silent mantra. I am a man. This is not me. But the reflection didn't change. She just kept staring back, her existence a brutal refutation of everything I knew to be true. Zipping up my jacket felt like an act of surrender. I was hiding the pink sports bra, hiding my new breasts, but it was an admission that they were there, that this was real. I pulled my ski pants up, the fabric bunching awkwardly over the leggings in my wider hips. I felt like a fraud, a man playing a poorly rehearsed role in a body that wasn't his. My hands shook as I pushed the restroom door open. The bright mountain sunlight was blinding after the dim interior. I squinted, my heart thudding a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like every single person on the crowded deck of the lodge was staring at me. And they were, or at least, it felt that way. As I navigated my way through the throng of skiers and snowboarders, I became acutely aware of the shift. Before, I was just another guy on the mountain, functionally invisible in my dark, practical ski gear. Now, heads were turning. A group of young snowboarders leaning against a railing stopped their conversation as I walked past. One of them let out a low whistle. "Whoa, check her out," I heard one of them mutter to his friend, not even bothering to lower his voice. Another one called out, "Hey, Babe, don't I know you from my dreams? My face erupted in a hot, mortifying blush. It was visceral, an uncontrollable physical reaction. My old self, the Mark from an hour ago, would have been annoyed, maybe a little disgusted by their juvenile display. This new self, this woman I had become, felt something entirely different. It was a humiliating, terrifying cocktail of shame, anger, and a tiny, shameful flutter of something else, something I couldn't and didn't want to name. This was the curse in action. This was the gaze. It wasn't just an abstract concept anymore. It was a tangible force, a wave of unwanted attention that washed over me, making me feel small and scrutinized. I pulled my head down, letting my new, long hair fall forward to hide my burning cheeks, and quickened my pace. My walk was still unsteady, a clumsy wobble that was only accentuated by my haste. I probably looked like a fawn on ice. I just needed to get my skis and get off this mountain, find a hole to crawl into and figure out how to undo this nightmare. As I reached the ski racks, fumbling to identify my own gear among the dozens of pairs, a man approached me. He looked to be in his late 20s, with a friendly, clean-cut face and a warm smile. Having some trouble there, he asked, his voice pleasant. I froze. I hadn't tried to speak to anyone yet. What would my voice sound like? The high-pitched scream in the bathroom echoed in my memory. I just nodded, keeping my face averted. Here, let me help, he said, stepping closer. He smelled faintly of pine and expensive sunscreen. Which ones are yours? I couldn't just point forever. I had to speak. I cleared my throat, which felt smaller and tighter than it should, and forced out a word. The black ones? The voice that came out was not mine. It was a woman's voice. It was clear, melodic, and a full octave higher than my own. It sounded breathy and uncertain, but it was undeniably female. Hearing it come from my own mouth was profoundly disorienting, like listening to a recording of a stranger. The man didn't seem to notice my inner turmoil. He just smiled wider. Got it. He easily located my skis and pulled them from the rack, clicking them together. My name's Jake. By the way. I started to say, then caught myself. I couldn't say Mark. Maria, I blurted out, the first female name that popped into my head. It felt like ash in my mouth. Maria? That's a beautiful name, Jake said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He handed me my skis. His fingers brushed against mine, and a jolt, like a tiny static shock, shot up my arm. My skin tingled where he'd touched me. My body was reacting on its own, with a sensitivity that was completely new. Thanks, I managed to squeak out, my voice even higher this time. You know, he said, leaning against the rack casually, my friends and I were just about to head inside for some hot chocolate, or maybe something a little stronger. You should join us. A beautiful woman shouldn't be skiing alone. There it was again, that casual categorization. A beautiful woman. He wasn't talking to Mark Peterson, the individual. He was talking to a face, a body, an image. The curse was working perfectly. Part of me, the old me, wanted to recoil in disgust. I wanted to tell him to get lost, to leave me alone. But another part of me, a treacherous alien part that was rapidly colonizing my brain, was simply frozen, paralyzed by the novel experience of being looked at with open, friendly admiration. His smile wasn't leering, like the teenager's comments. It was genuine, and that, somehow, was even more confusing. My heart was fluttering in my chest in a way that felt suspiciously like excitement. I can't, I stammered. Finally finding my voice, I have to go. Jake's smile faltered for a second, a flicker of disappointment crossing his features. Oh, okay, well, maybe I'll see you on the slopes. Maria. Maybe, I lied, grabbing my skis and practically running away. I didn't look back. I jammed my boots into my bindings, fumbling with the mechanisms that had been second nature to me for 20 years. As I pushed off with my poles, a wave of dizziness hit me. The simple, kind invitation from a stranger had left me more shaken than the whistles and catcalls. The catcalls were easy to hate, They were vulgar and dehumanizing, but Jake's polite flirtation, it had stirred something in me, a nervous, trembling response from a body that was programmed to react in ways my mind couldn't comprehend. The ski bunny's curse wasn't just about changing my appearance, it was changing how I felt, how I reacted, how my very nerves and blood responded to the world. And that was the most terrifying part of all. The ski down to the base village was the longest, most harrowing 10 minutes of my life. Every turn was a struggle. My new body was a stranger to me. The wider hips and fuller chest threw my balance off completely. I felt top-heavy and unstable. The muscles in my legs, while shapely and toned, didn't have the same dense power I was used to. I skied like a beginner, making wide, cautious pizza wedge turns. My teeth gritted in frustration. Other skiers, seeing my tentative progress and my flashy though unseen pink gear, probably just assumed I was another ski bunny who was all gear and no skill. The irony was a bitter, burning coal in my stomach. I made it to my rented condo without any further incident, but my nerves were completely frayed. I fumbled with the keycard, my slender fingers lacking their former dexterity, and finally managed to get the door open. I stumbled inside, kicking off my ski boots and locking the door behind me, leaning against it as if to keep the entire altered world at bay. Silence. The condo was quiet and still, my sanctuary, but it was no longer safe. My first priority was to get out of these clothes. I peeled off my ski jacket and pants, leaving them in a pile on the floor. I stood there, in the middle of the living room, wearing only the pink sports bra, the black leggings, and the matching pink thong. I caught my reflection in the dark screen of the television. The image of the slender, curvy woman staring back at me was a fresh shock to the system. I needed my own clothes. I needed the familiar comfort of my worn jeans, my soft, shapeless gray hoodie, the clothes I had packed, the clothes that belonged to Mark Peterson. I rushed into the bedroom and threw open the closet door. My suitcase was on the luggage rack where I'd left it. I unzipped it with frantic energy, my heart pounding with a desperate hope that this, at least, would be normal. It wasn't. The closet wasn't filled with my flannel shirts and fleece jackets. Instead, it was a sea of soft, feminine fabrics and bright colors. Cashmere sweaters in cream and blush pink hung next to silk blouses. A short, pleated tennis-style skirt hung next to a pair of form-fitting ski pants in a garish white. My suitcase was even worse. My neatly folded stacks of t-shirts and jeans were gone. In their place was a jumble of delicate, lacy underwear, soft-looking knit dresses, and several pairs of tights in various shades and thicknesses. A small clear bag held not my razor and shaving cream, but an arsenal of makeup tubes of mascara, pots of eyeshadow, and a dozen different shades of lipstick. A choked sob escaped my lips. The curse was thorough. It hadn't just changed me, it had changed my world, rewriting my reality down to the very clothes in my luggage. There was no escape. There were no comfortable gray hoodies to hide in. I sank to my knees, defeated. The rational part of my brain was gone, drowned in a tidal wave of panic and despair. I was truly, utterly trapped. After what felt like an eternity, a cold draft from the window snapped me out of my stupor. I was still standing there in my underwear, and I was starting to shiver. My new, less insulated body was more susceptible to the cold. I had to put something on. With a heavy sense of resignation, I turned back to the closet. My eyes landed on a simple outfit, perhaps the least offensive of the bunch. It was a soft, cream-colored turtleneck sweater made of some kind of fuzzy wool, and a short, gray wool skirt. It looked like something a college student would wear. It was absurd. I pulled the sweater over my head. The material was incredibly soft against my skin, clinging to my new curves in a way none of my old clothes ever had. It hugged my waist and stretched over my breasts, accentuating their shape. The feeling was strange, not entirely unpleasant, but deeply unsettling. Then came the skirt. It was short, really short. It barely reached mid-thigh. The idea of wearing it, of having my legs so exposed, was mortifying, but the only other options were leggings that might as well be painted on, or other, even shorter skirts, and I couldn't stay in my underwear forever. The real challenge was the underwear drawer. I opened it hesitantly. It was filled with silks and laces in a rainbow of colors. I averted my eyes, grabbed the most plain-looking pair of white cotton panties I could find, and quickly put them on. The fit was snug, foreign. Then I saw the tights. The outfit wouldn't work without them. My legs were completely bare. With a sigh that felt like it came from the depths of my soul, I picked up a pair of thin, white, slightly opaque stockings. The material felt impossibly delicate in my hands. I'd never touched anything like it. I sat on the edge of the bed and painstakingly began the awkward process of pulling them on. It was a struggle. I snagged them once with one of my new, perfectly manicured nails and nearly cried out in frustration. Finally, they were on, sheathing my legs in a smooth, soft layer of nylon. The sensation was indescribable. It was a constant, light pressure, a silken caress with every tiny movement. When I stood up, I could feel the whisper of the fabric against itself as I walked. It was both intimate and incredibly strange. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror on the back of the door. A young woman stared back. She was wearing a cozy sweater, a short gray skirt, and thin white stockings that did little to hide the shape of her legs. She looked cute, polished, and completely, utterly not me. The sight filled me with a confusing mix of revulsion and a bizarre, detached curiosity, the male part of my brain, the part that had spent years appreciating the female form. Couldn't help but objectively note that the reflection was attractive, the new terrified. Female part of me just wanted to crawl out of my own skin. I tried to walk. The short skirt and the slippery stockings changed my gait. I had to take smaller steps. I was acutely aware of my hips, of the way they swayed slightly with each movement. It was an involuntary, physical response to my new anatomy, and it made me feel like a puppet. Every step sent a fresh wave of humiliation through me. This was my life now, a life of soft sweaters, short skirts, and the constant, unnerving sensation of nylon against my skin. A life of being looked at, of being perceived as this girl. The conflict within me was a raging storm. Part of me screamed in protest, clinging to the fading ghost of my masculinity, but another, quieter part, a part that was being born out of this new flesh, was simply observing, feeling, experiencing, and it was that quiet, curious part that scared me most of all. I couldn't stay in the condo. The silence was deafening, and every reflective surface threw my new alien image back at me. I needed a distraction. I needed noise. I needed to be around people, even if it was terrifying. Maybe if I saw other people acting normally, I could trick my brain into believing some semblance of normalcy still existed. I pulled on a pair of knee-high, heeled leather boots, the only practical footwear I could find among a sea of delicate heels and fluffy slippers, and a stylish, fitted pink parka that had replaced my bulky black one. The boots made me even more unsteady, forcing a slight, lilting sway into my walk that I couldn't control. The coat, of course, was tailored to perfection, nipping in at the waist and flaring out over my hips. Every piece of clothing felt like a cage, shaping me, defining me as something I was not. I walked over to the village square, a bustling plaza at the base of the mountain, surrounded by shops and restaurants. A large bonfire was crackling in a stone pit, and people were gathered around it, laughing and drinking. I found a spot on the edge of the crowd, pulling my coat tighter around me, trying to make myself as small as possible. The gaze was immediate. I could feel it, the quick glances from men, the more assessing, sometimes critical, looks from other women. My short skirt and white stockings seemed to be a magnet for attention. I felt a blush creeping up my neck and kept my eyes fixed on the dancing flames. "Well, I'll be damned. Fancy meeting you here?" The voice was familiar, deep, cheerful, and masculine. I looked up, and my blood turned to ice. It was Dave, Dave Miller, my best friend from college. We saw each other a few times a year, usually for a ski trip or a ball game. He lived in Denver and had mentioned he might be coming up to Aspen this weekend. In my panic, I had completely forgotten. He was standing right in front of me, a wide, friendly grin on his face, and he was looking at me with absolutely no recognition whatsoever. He wasn't looking at his friend, Mark. He was looking at a woman he'd never seen before, a woman he clearly found attractive. My mouth went dry. I couldn't speak. What could I possibly say, Dave? It's me. Mark, I was cursed by a ski bunny. He'd think I was insane. He'd call security. Sorry to stare, he said, his grin softening into a charming smile. It's just, you look a little lost in thought, and I thought I should probably come over and say hi. I'm Dave. He extended a hand. I stared at it for a moment, my mind racing. Shaking his hand felt like a betrayal of our entire friendship, a lie of an epic proportion, but not shaking it would be rude and would draw even more attention. Hesitantly, I placed my slender, manicured hand in his big, warm one. Maria, I said, the fake name feeling even more false and pathetic now. Maria, he repeated, holding my hand for a second longer than necessary. That's a beautiful name. Are you here alone? I just nodded, unable to form words. My best friend. My friend who had been the best man at my wedding, who had helped me move out after my divorce, who I'd known for almost 20 years, was hitting on me. The sheer, soul-crushing absurdity of the situation was so overwhelming I almost laughed, or cried. I wasn't sure which. Well, in that case, he said, his voice dropping a little lower, can I buy you a drink, Maria? There's a great little bar just over there. They make a hot toddy that'll change your life. Every instinct in my body screamed, no, run. Get away from him. This is wrong on every conceivable level. But I was frozen, and a twisted, perverse part of me was morbidly curious. What would happen next? This was the ultimate test of the curse, wasn't it? Okay, I heard myself say, the word a soft whisper. Dave's face lit up. Great. Come on. He gently placed a hand on the small of my back to guide me through the crowd. The pressure of his palm, even through my thick parka, sent a bizarre electric shock through my entire nervous system. My body reacted instantly. A shiver running down my spine, my skin flushing. It was a completely involuntary, purely physical response. My mind was screaming in protest, but my body was responding as if it belonged to a woman who was being touched by an attractive man. We sat at a small table in a cozy wood-paneled bar. Dave ordered us 2 hot toddies and started talking. He was his usual charming, funny self. He told me about his week, a funny story about his boss, his plans for the rest of the weekend. He was trying to impress me, Maria, the stranger, and I just sat there, nodding and offering one-word answers, my mind a chaotic mess. He reached across the table and lightly touched my hand. You're very quiet, he said softly. Did I say something wrong? No, I managed, my voice trembling slightly. Just a long day. I get that, he said, his thumb gently stroking the back of my hand. The simple, innocent touch was sending my senses into overdrive. My heart was hammering, my palms were sweating. A strange warmth was spreading through my chest. Part of me was recoiling in horror from my best friend's touch, but the treacherous new wiring in my brain was interpreting it as intimacy. My cheeks were on fire. He leaned in closer, his voice a low murmur. Well, I hope I can make the end of it a little better. He was so close I could smell the faint scent of cinnamon from his drink on his breath. You are, without a doubt, the most beautiful woman I've seen on this entire mountain. His words, meant as a compliment for a stranger, felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He was looking at this face, this body, and seeing beauty. He wasn't seeing his friend Mark, who was trapped inside, screaming. The conflict inside me reached a fever pitch. The man I was, the identity I clung to, was horrified and disgusted. But the body I was in, this hypersensitive female form, was responding with a will of its own. My pulse was racing. A strange, fluttering heat was building deep in my belly. My mind was at war with my own physiology. I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled my hand away abruptly. "I have to go," I said. My voice choked. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped loudly on the wooden floor. Dave looked up at me, his face a mask of confusion and surprise. "Maria, wait." I didn't wait. I fled. I ran out of the bar, out into the cold night air, my heeled boots slipping on the icy cobblestones. I didn't stop running until I was back inside my condo. The door locked. The chain slid across. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, my body trembling uncontrollably. That night, I stood in front of the mirror for hours. I took off the clothes, the costume, and just stared at the naked female form that was now mine. With a hesitant, trembling hand, I reached out and touched the soft curve of my hip. I traced the line of my waist, the swell of my breast. My skin was so soft, so sensitive. The fear was still there, a cold, hard knot in my stomach, but as my fingers explored this new terrain, another emotion began to surface, something darker and more complex. It was a strange, terrifying fascination, a dizzying, horrifying sense of allure. I was repulsed by what I had become, but I was also undeniably captivated by the beautiful stranger in the mirror, the stranger that was me. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in the king-sized bed, tangled in sheets that felt too soft, too silky. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dave's face, full of confusion. I could still feel the phantom pressure of his hand on my back, the ghost of his thumb stroking my skin. My body had betrayed me. It had responded to my best friend's flirtations with a biological enthusiasm that my mind couldn't fight. Was this what she meant returned to you tenfold, in pleasure and pain? The pain was the loss of my identity, the humiliation, the fear, but the pleasure. Was that the terrifying warmth that had spread through me, the racing pulse, the undeniable, chemical thrill of being desired? The thought was sickening. I was Mark Peterson. I liked women. I did not want to be a woman, and I certainly didn't want to be attracted to the attention of men. But the curse hadn't given me a choice. It had hot-wired my body with a new set of responses, a new operating system, and my old self was just a ghost trapped in the machine. When the first pale light of dawn crept through the blinds, I was already up, pacing the floor of the condo. My mind was a battlefield. One side screamed for action, find the girl in pink, hunt her down, beg, plead, threaten, do whatever it takes to make her reverse this monstrous curse. I had to get my life back. But another voice, a softer, more insidious whisper, kept asking what life. What was I so desperate to get back to a sterile condo that echoed with the memory of a failed marriage, a job that paid the bills, but brought me no joy, a quiet, lonely existence where my only real escape was skiing? My life as Mark Peterson wasn't exactly a masterpiece. It was fine, it was comfortable, it was empty. In the last 24 hours, as this strange woman, Maria, I had felt more intense emotion than I had in the entire past year. Terror, yes, panic, absolutely, but also something else, that jolt of connection when Jake touched my hand. The dizzying, terrifying thrill of Dave's compliments. I was no longer invisible. The world didn't look past me anymore. It looked at me, intently. I walked over to the closet and pulled out another one of the absurd outfits. This one was a pair of tight, dark-washed jeans designed for a woman's body, with a stretch to them that hugged every curve and a simple, long-sleeve pink top that was soft as a cloud. As I dressed, the motions were becoming slightly less alien. I knew to expect the way the jeans would tighten over my hips and rear. I knew how the soft fabric of the shirt would drape over my breasts. I looked in the mirror. This outfit was more casual, less costumey than the skirt and stockings. It looked normal, a normal girl getting ready for her day. And for a terrifying moment, I saw a flicker of something other than a horrified prisoner in my reflection's eyes. A flicker of resignation, Or was it something more? I thought about my marriage to Claire towards the end. She had told me I was emotionally distant. "It's like you're not even here. Mark," she'd said, her voice full of a sadness I couldn't reach. "You're just a ghost in a gray hoodie." Now, I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was vibrant. I was visible. I was pink. The choice was laid bare before me. Resistance or something else. I could spend my days, my weeks, chasing a magical girl in the hopes of returning to my lonely, gray life. Or I could stay here, in this strange, terrifying, and undeniably compelling new reality. I made my decision. I walked to the door, my hand hovering over the handle. I was dressed. I had a wallet full of cash and credit cards that now bore the name Maria Peterson. I could walk out that door, get on the lift, and ski, or I could try to find her. I thought of the cold fury in her eyes. I thought of her words, "Let the gaze that you cast return to you." This wasn't just a punishment. It was a lesson. And maybe, just maybe, it was a lesson I needed to learn. Maybe I needed to understand what it felt like to be on the other side of the gaze before I could ever truly be myself again. Or maybe this was who I was now. I opened the door. The cold mountain air hit my face. I stepped outside and walked toward the ski lift, my new hips swaying in a rhythm that was starting to feel less like a performance and more like my own. I ended up on the same chairlift where it had all started. This time, I was alone, as the chair climbed higher and higher, the world shrinking below. I looked down at the skiers. They were colorful specks against the white, carving their temporary signatures into the snow. I thought about my old life, my quiet solitude, the comfortable numbness of being Mark, and I thought about the last day, the terrifying sensitivity of this new body, the shocking power of a stranger's smile, the confusing warmth of my best friend's hand. The lift reached the summit. I stood up, slid down the ramp, and pulled myself to the edge of the slope. The entire valley was spread out before me, a breathtaking panorama of snow and sky. The wind picked up, whipping my long hair across my face and sending a chill through my thin pink shirt. It was a cold, sharp, vibrant feeling. I felt exquisitely, painfully alive. I could try to find her. I could fight this with every fiber of my being. I could resist. Or I could just ski. I took a deep breath, the icy air filling my lungs, and for the first time, I looked down at my new female body not with horror or disgust, but with a complex, unnerving sense of acceptance. I whispered the words into the wind, a confession to the mountains and to myself. Maybe this isn't a curse after all. Then, I pushed off, and for the first time as Maria, I pointed my skis downhill and let myself fly.